Good afternoon, everyone. Or excuse me, good evening. Welcome to tonight's Clackamas County Assessment and Taxation Department Town Hall. I'm Scott Anderson with Clackamas County Public and Government Affairs. Joining us today are Clackamas County Assessor Tammy Little, along with her staff. And just so you know, that combined, her team has been working in the assessment and taxation field for more than 100 years. They're incredibly knowledgeable about the property tax system. The purpose of today's town hall is for residents to gain a better understanding of property taxes and have confidence in the tax system, and for our experts to answer any questions you may have about property taxes or the tax process. If you have a question about anything during the presentation, please don't hesitate to ask it. You can simply ask questions via the chat function. Simply type your question in there and we'll go ahead and read it during the presentation and you can get an answer. I also want you to know that our staff is happy to answer any and all questions as we go along. Part of tonight's town hall is to get answers about your specific property tax questions. When you registered for today's town hall, you marked down if you needed to talk with an assessment and taxation staff member. You said you do need to talk with one of our appraisers. Will be reaching out to you tomorrow or soon. If after the presentation you found that you now need to ask a specific question regarding your property taxes, we can connect you with an appraiser. You can do that by calling our main office line at 503-655-8671 or by sending an email to propertytaxinfo@clackamas.us and let us know that you attended tonight's town hall. I'll mention this information again after the presentation. I'll also put it in the chat, so don't worry if you didn't get all that information. Speaking of tonight's presentation, please be aware that this session is being recorded and will be available to watch soon on the county's YouTube channel. And with that, we're going to go to Clackamas County Assessor Tammy Little for opening comments. Tammy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tammy Little, Clackamas County Assessor, and I want to thank you for attending our annual presentation on property taxes. Each fall for over 30 years, we've conducted these town halls in communities around Clackamas County. This is our second year doing it virtually. We believe it's important to help taxpayers understand their statement, their taxes, their values. Plus, we want to answer any specific questions you have about your property. We also think it's important to contribute to helping all of our residents understand the complexities of Oregon's property tax system. And our goal tonight is to provide information that will be beneficial and result in a more informed public. I really consider myself very fortunate to work with a talented and competent group of people, and some of them are here tonight. It's my privilege to introduce them. We have our Deputy Assessor, Bronson Rueda, our Appraisal Manager, Lynn Longfellow, Sales Data Analysts, Matt, Brandy, Brad, Dina, our Tax District Analyst, plus our resident farm and forest expert, Tony, and our veteran and senior deferral expert, Susan. I'd also like to thank Public and Government Affairs staff for facilitating this webinar. Thank you, Scott. And our presentation tonight will be given by Deputy Assessor Bronson Rueda. Again, we want to thank everyone for attending. And Bronson, you're up.
Bronson, you're on mute.
Okay, am I allowed 3 mistakes? Is that the limit? All right, thank you, Tammy, and thank you to everyone joining us tonight. And welcome to the virtual Assessors Town Hall. My name is Bronson Rueda, and I'm a Deputy Assessor, and I have been with the Assessment and Taxation Department for nearly 3 years. Prior to my time at Clackamas County, I spent 8 years at the Oregon Department of Revenue in the Property Tax Division, where I managed about 35 appraisers and 3 managers. Prior to my time at the Oregon Department of Revenue, I spent 9 years as a commercial fee appraiser. The last 5 of those, I managed a team of appraisers that focused on office and medical office valuations in Oregon, mostly for financing purposes. Now let me share my screen. Give me a second here. All right. Okay, now about today's presentation. As Tammy stated previously, one of the goals today is to help folks gain a better understanding of our property tax system. I will also give a broad overview of our real estate market and property taxes. Again, if you have questions throughout this presentation, which is about an hour, please ask using the chat function. We will also have time at the end for questions. Now, before I move on, the picture that you're looking at is an oblique view of the Willamette Falls in Oregon City. And a fun fact about the Willamette Falls is it's the largest waterfall by volume in the Northwest. And here we go. So, everyone out there like educational videos? I can tell you I do. The next slide features a 4.5-minute video giving an overview of Oregon's property tax system. So sit back and relax, and let's give this video a view.
This is Joe Meek, one of the most famous men in Oregon history, fur trapper, mountain man, and the first marshal of the Oregon Territory. Joe was fearless. But Joe had an image problem. You see, Joseph Lafayette Meek was also Oregon's first tax collector. In 1843, voluntary contributions were solicited to pay Oregon's provisional legislators. The first-year returns totaled $81.50. Clearly, an assessment was due and enforcement needed. So the legislators decided to tax virtually everything: a person's pocket watch, their horse, saddle, clothing, even tools of their trade. The next year, 1844, the state assessment roll totaled $218,000, with cattle constituting almost half the roll. And that's the way property taxes started in Oregon. People paid property taxes as a percentage of the market value of their property. It was called a levy system, and it stayed that way for over a century. Now it took a while for Oregonians to begin to appreciate what tax dollars do for quality of life. They provide for schools, law enforcement, and fire protection. Citizens were safer, happier, and more comfortable. Life was good. Then, as it always seems to happen, taxes increased. Part of it was because property values kept rising, but part of it also was that there were virtually no limits on the amount of property taxes that districts could levy. Finally, in 1990, Oregon voters approved Measure 5. Measure 5 placed limits on two broad categories of property taxes: taxes for public schools and taxes used to support other government operations like fire and police protection. Starting in 1990, real estate values really began to climb, negating some of the good that Measure 5 had done. Still searching for relief from rising taxes, in 1996, Oregonians approved Measure 47, which was designed to limit how fast and how much property values could increase. However, the legislature soon found that measure unworkable. It was scrapped and quickly replaced by Measure 50, which was approved by voters in May of 1997. Measure 50 significantly changed the property tax system. It separated assessed value from real market value, creating a more stable and predictable tax bill from year to year. Under the previous levy-based system, taxing districts received the full amount of property tax authorized by the voters, regardless of changes in the total assessed value within the district. Annual changes in value had a direct effect on property owners because the rate was just recalculated to raise the amounts requested by the district, and that made tax bills yo-yo and unsettled the voters. Think of it as a cherry pie. Property owners authorize the districts to tax them at a rate that generates enough money to buy a cherry pie. Each year, the district adjusts their rates so that they can buy the entire cherry pie. As the amount of taxable property and its value fluctuates, what they charge each taxpayer changes in order to still be able to buy the whole pie. And when the cost of the pie goes up, so does each taxpayer's property tax bill. Under the new rate-based system, changes in the total assessed value of a taxing district do not change the tax rate. Measure 50 created a maximum assessed value, which was the real market value of your property in 1995 less 10%. Taxes were calculated on the assessed value, which is the lower of the real market value and the maximum assessed value. Since then, growth in the maximum assessed value is limited to 3% regardless of fluctuations in the real estate market, provided there have been no changes to the property, such as new construction. For homes built after 1995, the maximum assessed value is determined using the ratio of maximum assessed value to real market value of similar properties in the county in the year constructed or improved. Long story short, at the time, voters wanted tax limitations and predictability. And while it's not a perfect solution, it is an improvement. If you have questions about any of the content of this video, please reach out to your local assessment and taxation office, and they'll fill you in.
Okay. The good news is, if you like that video, there are more Oregon property tax tutorial videos on YouTube, and you can view them anytime. I think they're interesting and informative, and I recommend giving them a watch. So on this next slide, before I get into the meat of it, there are two important snippets you need to know or remember. Number one, the assessment date for the values and property tax on your current tax statement is January 1st, 2021. However, the market information used to value your property on your current tax statement is from 2020. This is important to remember as we move forward. Snippet number two, there will be numerous slides in this presentation that have a lot of data. In most of the slides with data, I will point out highlights and I won't cover the entirety of the data. So please ask questions if there is something I don't cover that you're curious to learn more about. Now, the slide. The 2021 real market value in our county grew by 9.6%. That's the largest growth rate since 2017 and almost double the growth rate last year. The paragraph on the right of the slide shows a few stats we had in Clackamas County from new construction. 26 new subdivisions, 1,317 new homes built, and $1.2 billion in additional taxable value. All right, this slide, you're looking at some market observations. These are 2020 statistics from RMLS of the Portland metro area housing market. And if you're not familiar with RMLS, it stands for Realtor Multiple Listing Service. It's an online service providing listings and sales information of residential real estate. In the next slide, we will drill down to Clackamas County stats, but here we will focus on the Portland metro area at a high level, which we are part of. You can see sales of residential properties continue to be strong and sale prices continue to rise. The average sale price was up 7.6% and the median sale price was up 7.3%. All of the indicators on this page point to an appreciating real estate market. All right, as promised, here is some RMLS data showing the change in market values from January 1st, 2020 to January 1st, 2021 for select Clackamas County neighborhoods. Note that the value changes show how diverse our county is from urban to rural and the difference in market change in those real estate sectors. You have at the low end, Oregon City and Canby at 7.6%, and then at the high end, Mount Hood at 12.2%. Okay, we have value adjustments here. In this slide, we are looking at changes in value according to our internal sales study to reach market value as of January 1st, 2021 for Clackamas County. Here are all of the 16 cities in our county, plus the unincorporated Damascus area. Remember a few slides ago, I stated real market value in the county grew 9.6% overall. Well, you can see all the double-digit growth in multiple areas throughout the county. The residential market was strong in 2020. All right, this is a timeline of some of the events in the Assessment and Taxation Department. It represents both a calendar year and how we operate on a fiscal year. Note that January 1st of any given year is our assessment date, and we don't mail statements until October. And then the first property tax payment is due by November 15th, nearly a year after the assessment date. And Scott or anyone, can you guys see my arrow as I move it around? In case I want to point something out.
Yes, Bronson, we
Yeah,
can.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, so let's take a step back and examine the assessment date. Let's talk about the time period to collect market data for this assessment date. It's important to make the connection that the market period of your recent tax statement is from 2020. So let's start from now. Here we are, beginning in November. And let's work backwards. Your property taxes are due November 15th. The taxes that you owe are calculated based on the assessed value of your property as of the assessment date of January 1st, 2021, all the way back here. In other words, the values you're looking at on your tax statement represent a point in time 10 months ago. Now going further back, the values on your tax statement are ultimately determined by the market period from January 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020. And that time frame is over a year ago. A lot to absorb, and it can get confusing. Do we have any questions yet? All right, let's keep going. Oh, no. Okay, the next group of slides covers property tax law, specifically Measure 5 and Measure 50. We will cover these two measures in detail on later slides, but at a high level, our property tax system is shaped by these two initiatives put on the ballots by voters that are now part of our Oregon Constitution. I typically don't read slides, but I think this slide is an exception. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Measure 5. It passed in 1990. This is straight from the slide here. Passed in 1990. It's a tax limitation and sets limits on the amount of taxes that can be collected from each property in both the education and general government categories. And then Measure 50, passed in 1997, it's a value limitation and limits maximum assessed value, or MAV, growth to 3% annually. Taxes are based on the lower of real market value or maximum assessed value. In addition, permanent tax rates were established for all local districts with existing tax basis and serial levies. So the big takeaway here is that Measure 5 is a tax limitation and Measure 50 is a value limitation. Neither one of these measures places a 3% cap on your tax growth per year, and we'll dig deeper in this later. All right, what are my taxes based on? It's important to understand two items, which are covered in the first two bullets of this slide. One, property in Oregon is not taxed on real market value, or RMV. Number two, property taxes in Oregon are based on a calculated Measure 50 assessed value. Now, for those familiar with California's Proposition 13, established in the late 70s, in Oregon, market value does not reset when a property is sold. And then finally, taxes in Oregon are calculated on the assessed value, which is the lesser of RMV or MAV. I know there's a lot to keep track of, but here's the bottom line. Typically, the MAV is equal to the AV, or assessed value, which is what taxes are based on. So if MAV can only go up 3% per year, with some exceptions, this creates the predictability of property taxes, which is what the Oregon voters were looking for. And one more thing to think about, if you're saying to yourself, well, if MAV can only go up 3%, why do my property taxes sometimes go up more than 3% in a year? One answer is new construction or remodeling a property. Another common answer is that voters in any given taxing district can vote in local option measures or bonds that can increase a property tax bill more than 3%. All right, let's move on unless there's any questions. All right, before I get into what Measure 50 is, I think it is important to understand why we have Measure 50. The video you watched alluded to some of this, but prior to Measure 50, taxes were based on the market value of a property. As you know, market values can fluctuate up or down in any given year. Thus, property taxes fluctuated up and down accordingly, creating a property tax environment that was unpredictable. While the voters of Oregon wanted more predictability, more consistency in their property taxes, so Measure 50 was born. So how does Measure 50 work? Let's go over the bullets on the slide. Bullet 1, when Measure 50 was passed in 1997, maximum assessed value was created, or MAV. MAV equaled 90% of the 1995-96 fair market value, or RMV. Bullet 2, going forward, Measure 50 limits future growth on MAV to 3% per year, with some exceptions. Next bullet, the exceptions include new construction, remodeling, development of new subdivisions, and rezoning. And then the last bullet, Measure 50 established permanent tax rates for all local taxing districts with existing tax basis and serial limits. And you'll notice some of this wording is kind of a repeat, but repetition is good in my opinion. All right, so your taxes went up more than you expected. This slide covers examples of how your taxes may go up more than 3% in any given year. Remember, neither Measure 5 or Measure 50 put a limitation on tax growth, just tax limitations and maximum assessed value growth respectively. I want to emphasize again the point that taxes can go up more than 3%. I will also note that the Oregon Department of Revenue teaches a 3-day class covering this topic, which proves the complexity and many dimensions of Measure 50. Okay, now we're getting into some data here. This slide covers the value history of one account in Clackamas County. The time period begins in 1997, the start of Measure 50, and ends with this year's value. You'll notice there's a break in years from 2000 to 2010 because there simply isn't enough room on the page for all the data. But the data does cover the recession years in the early 2010 time period. Looking at the slide in the upper left-hand corner, you'll notice the term cut. That refers to the 10% off the 1995 value to establish the first 1997 MAV. And the term cap refers to the 3% growth cap for MAV with exceptions. Again, I want to emphasize that 3% maximum growth refers to the growth limit for MAV, not a growth limit in tax increases year over year. So looking at this slide, what stands out to me is the market change. It's the first red column here, and the AV change, the second red column. The market value fluctuates according to what the real estate market does in any given year with big swings up and down. But the AV grows at a steady 3% pace. Look at the market change of negative 7.06 here in 2011, and then negative 12.75% in 2012. And then the growth in market change over 10% in 2014 and 15 over here gets into double digits. Those are big swings. Now look down at the AV, everything's steady, just growing at 3%. This is an example of the property tax predictability that taxpayers wanted. All right, now we're getting into change property ratio. So what is a change property ratio, also referred to as CPR? Well, remember Measure 50 was enacted back in 1997, and it created an MAV benefit for all property at that time. But what about the property built post 1997? How do they get an MAV benefit? Well, for new construction, the assessor's office values the property, which creates an RMV. Then a changed property ratio, again, CPR, is applied to the RMV, which creates an MAV for that property, providing a benefit similar to property already in existence. The CPR is a ratio of MAV to unchanged RMV for specific property types and is calculated every year. Okay, so here is a list and history of the Clackamas County CPRs since 2013. Take a look at the column labeled 1XX residential over here. The CPR for residential properties in the 2021-2022 tax year is 0.603. This means that any new property built in 2021 will have that ratio applied to the RMV to create an MAV. As you can see, since 2013, the residential CPR has generally decreased. A decrease in CPR happens when property values are rising. If we hit another recession, the CPR will most likely move upwards toward 1. Let's look at an example to hopefully gain some clarity. Okay, remember, Measure 50 created a tax benefit for properties in existence in 1997, but for new property, it's fair to give that same benefit. Let's say a property owner builds a new home valued at $600,000, which is the RMV or real market value. So we need to give this home their Measure 50 benefit and calculate the MAV. We apply the 2021-22 residential change property ratio of 0.603 to the RMV. After applying the residential CPR, the MAV is created, which is $361,800. Lastly, taxes are calculated from the AV, and the AV equals the lesser of RMV or MAV. In this example, the MAV is lower than the RMV, so the property has an AV of $361,800. This creates a Measure 50 tax benefit similar to other properties already in existence. All right, do I have any questions yet over CPR or anything we've covered with Measure 50?
No, Bronson, nothing yet.
Okay, let's keep going. We have found over the last year and a half that with Zoom webinars such as this, there's less questions than if we do it in person, but that's okay. Hopefully everyone is learning. Okay, so I've talked about Measure 50, the benefits provided, and the creation of MAV. I gave an example of how new construction creates an exception event, providing an MAV for a property. But there are other exception events besides just building a new house. This slide covers those exception events like remodeling and additions. So to tie the concept of Measure 50 back to the misconceived perception that property taxes can only go up 3% a year, nearly every Measure 50 event will increase MAV more than 3% on a property because you're adding more value than was there before. All right, these next 5 slides are some of my favorites, and I just think, you know, I'm in the right business because construction is interesting to me, but they provide some examples of Measure 50 exception events. So this first one, here's an example of a house that was raised or torn down and then a new house constructed in its place. Here's another example of a house that was torn down and then a new house constructed. All right, this third example, it's of a kitchen remodel. You can see it was gutted. You have new cabinets, new flooring, new appliances. Here's another example of a residence that was in less than average condition, and that had an extensive remodel to it. You can tell there's new windows, the brick was painted, new flooring. All right, this last example is of another kitchen remodel. You can see there's new countertops, new appliances, new cabinets with poles, new flooring. Back here, you can catch a glimpse of the under cabinet lighting and a undermount sink, which are popular right now. All right, this slide is a snapshot from our website. So after seeing this, if you want to go put in your own address, you can go on our website and do so. It's a search engine that allows you to put in your account number or address, and it shows a 5-year history of your RMV and MAV. Remember, you are taxed on your assessed value, which is the lesser of RMV and MAV. So in this example, the AV has always been the MAV because it's always been lower than the RMV. And I realize now this might be a little small depending on your screen, but the red line is the real market value and the blue line is the maximum assessed value. So this slide also makes the point that market adjustments can be more extreme where the MAV grows at a constant 3% pace. So if you notice the red line, it fluctuates at an irregular pace, while the blue line, the MAV, grows at a steady 3% pace each year. And one interesting fact, back in 2012, we had about 30,000 properties in Clackamas County where the red line dipped below the blue line. So the RMV dipped below the MAV. All right, so we're moving on from measure 50 and we're going on to measure 5, which is our next constitutional limitation. Measure 5 limits the amount of taxes that any one taxpayer can pay. The limits are based on RMV and fall into 2 categories, education and general government. The limitation on education is $5 per 1,000 of RMV, and the limitation on general government is $10 per 1,000 of RMV. It is important to note that the tax limitations are applied to RMV, but the actual tax is calculated from AV, assessed value. If the actual tax due goes above the measure 5 limitations for either category, compression is created. So let's look at an example on the next slide. All right, so at the top, there are 2 values that I'll be referring to, real market value and assessed value. Below the values, there are 4 column headers. Measure 5 limit, tax calculation, tax imposed, and tax compression due to measure 5. The next row is education, which has a limitation of $5 in tax to every 1,000 of real market value. I've already done the math here for you, but I'll still walk us through the numbers. The measure 5 limit on education is $3,136.10. You see that right here. This is calculated by dividing 5 by 1,000 and then multiplying the result into the real market value, which is given above, and is $627,222. The next column is the tax calculation. The education tax rate is given near the bottom of the slide under the header actual tax rates and is 7.289 down here. This number is per 1,000 of assessed value. Assessed value is near the top, So moving back on up here, $480,386. The resulting tax owed, shown in the education row, tax calculation column, is $3,501.53. You can see the resulting tax calculation is more than the Measure 5 limitation allows, so the lower number is the tax imposed, which is $3,136.10. The tax limitation creates compression for this taxpayer in the amount of $365.42 over here in red. The taxpayer is saving money by paying less taxes, but on the flip side, the local school district is receiving less money into their coffers. So kind of a double-edged sword there. All right, the next row is general government. Using the same methodology as the education row, you can see that the Measure 5 limit of $6,272.22 is much higher than the tax calculation of $2,881.22. So the tax imposed is equal to the tax calculation. Therefore, there is no compression for the general government category. Whoops. Go back here. All right. The next row is for bonds. Bonds are voted by the people and are not subject to Measure 5 limitations. Now, if you're being exposed to this for the first time, it's a lot to take in. That being said, I have to ask again, any questions? Any questions on Measure 5? All right, let's move on. Now let's get into some results. We have a little knowledge stored up in our heads here. Let's get into some of these details. So we have talked about how our tax system works and the market conditions for Clackamas County. Now let's focus on some of the results for the current 21-22 tax roll. Again, there was a 9.6% growth in real market value for the county as of the assessment date of January 1st, 2021. And most properties' assessed value grew by 3%. If you are one of the taxpayers who had a tax increase of greater than 3%, it may be due to a new money measure passing or a district levied more for bonded debt. Likewise, if you had a tax increase of less than 3%, it could be due to taxing districts levied less or paid off debt. Regarding compression, tax savings have decreased for many property owners due to increasing property values. 8,600 properties will receive less Measure 5 tax savings this year, which equates to a decrease of $11.6 million from last year. All right, now let's take a look at the taxing districts that had the greatest amount of tax rate change, either up or down. So these are the changes in levy rates for 2021. Just some of them. Take a look at this slide and see if any of these taxing districts are in your tax code area on your property tax statement. It may be an indicator of why your property taxes decreased or increased less or more than you anticipated. Notice there are only 3 new levies this year, but only a handful of Clackamas County homeowners will be impacted since the taxing districts are from the city of Portland and the Newburgh School District. Taxing districts that show an increase, like Estacada School District, right here, Estacada, an area where the bond rate increased, which raised the tax amount. And where there are negative changes, those districts levied a little less for their bonds. You can see over here on the right, the changes, the negative changes and the positive changes with these districts that are listed. And if you want to, you can also compare your own tax statements year over year to see how things were levied more or less. Okay, so the previous slide outlined the money measure changes in the county. This slide outlines the result of what your property taxes actually did, either going up or down. So take a look at this and see where your property lands. Here's Canby up here. I live in the Canby area, so my taxes had a small increase. But that's okay, because last year my taxes went up the highest percentage in the county. Remember, factors that control how much your taxes change from last year include voter approved money measure and new bonds, measure 50 exception value, compression, and taxing districts levying lower rates. Okay, a few slides back, you saw this taxing matrix. In a previous matrix, the calculation showed compression. In this matrix, it shows a tax change of 6.99%, right down here, which is obviously greater than 3%. Now look towards the bottom of the slide at the rate change column down here. You can see all three tax rate categories: education, general government, and bonded debt. They went up a total of 90 cents per 1,000 in assessed value. This caused an increase in tax greater than 3%. If you have questions about your property, let us know and we can help you look at your account to determine the reason for any tax increase above 3%. Okay, more data. This slide shows a lot of interesting data. If you focus on the 2021 column over here and work your way down, you can see the value and tax numbers that Clackamas County has and the changes in the past couple of years. This year, the county's RMV is over $94 billion. The taxable value is over $58 billion. And the tax imposed is over $998 million. Almost $1 billion in imposed tax. That's a lot of property taxes to collect. Something interesting to know is that we typically collect 87% of the imposed tax by the November 15th due date. What that means is of this $998 million, we'll collect 87% of that within the next 2 weeks. Another observation I'll point out is the tax changes section down here on the bottom half of the page. The number of accounts with taxes increasing between 2% and 4% is 60%. So these two columns right here, 60%, over 60%. This is an example of the predictability tax growth, of the predictable tax growth that voters wanted when voting in Measure 50 back in 1997. All right, more statistics you ask for? Okay, you shall receive. I will note, last year, the assessor, Tim Little, said that this was her favorite slide. So here we go, Tammy's favorite slide. This shows the change in market value and assessed value of all the accounts in Clackamas County. This time period is post Measure 50, and you can see the ups and downs of the market value growth rate, including the recession years, which is down here, 2009, 10, and 11. We had 4 years in decline before it started to turn around to double-digit growth. We have had positive growth after recession, including numerous years of double-digit growth. You can see that up here. You see the decline, and then things pick up, double-digit growth. Now take a look at the assessed value column right here. Note that every year the assessed value increased no matter what the market value did. This is due to the yearly 3% MAV growth on most accounts due to Measure 50. Not 1 year did the assessed value growth go into the negative. See that right here, no negative numbers. However, the growth of the assessed value did dip below 3% in 2010 and through 2012, right here. This was because of less construction and more accounts paying on market value instead of assessed value. I will note before I forget that most of these tax statistics are on our website if you want to go take a look at these at any time for this year or previous years. Okay, the last slide showed how values fluctuated and grew over time. This slide focuses on the change in taxes imposed since 1998. Items of note on this slide include in 2010 through 12, same time period, the recession. The growth rate in taxes dropped significantly due to the recession. There's the growth rate over here. However, taxes still increased every year, just not at the rate seen in other years. Taxes still increased. The tax imposed still increased, just not at the same rate as previously. And then in 2019, if you go up here, you see a big jump from 5.03 to 8.05%. That jump was because of money measures voted in. Okay, this is an interesting slide that shows the compression loss each year since 2007. Remember, compression loss typically increases when market values are going down and coming closer in line with MAV. And then compression loss typically decreases as real estate appreciates, and there's a greater separation between real market value and MAV. Look at the chart to see how this is shown to be true from the historic numbers. From 2011 through 2013, when market values were generally declining, compression was increasing. You see the increase right here. Then in 2014, when the real estate market was rebounding, compression loss started to decline. You see that here, all the way up through 2018. The anomaly here is in 2019, when real estate market values were continuing to increase, but the compression loss also increased. This was due to money measures voted in that increased the tax rate significantly for certain taxing districts, and that created compression. All right, next let's see how all these tax dollars are distributed. All right, this graphic displays how much out of each dollar collected in property taxes goes to the local services in the county. Starting at the upper left is the schools, K through 12, that receive 42.84 cents of every tax dollar collected. Next is the county, 17.82 cents for every property tax dollar collected. Down on the lower right is miscellaneous at 1.99 cents, and that includes port, Vector, cemetery, water parks, and lighting. All right, here's another dollar bill graph. Again, these are on our website if you want to print them out or go study them. This shows what percent of each tax dollar distributed to Clackamas County goes to various programs in the county. You can see in the upper left, public safety gets the largest share at 66.4%. Our department right here, assessment and taxation, we got 4.6%. And over here to the right of the dollar bill lists the programs in the general government category, which receives 16.5%. Again, all on our website. All right, here we have a sample tax statement. I want to focus on the right side of the statement over here. Near the top, in a rectangular outline, are the words 2021, 2022 current tax by district. This is a detailed list by taxing district of the property taxes owed. The first 4 lines comprise the education category. The next grouping of taxing districts is the general government category. Remember, these 2 categories are subject to compression through Measure 5 tax limitations. The last grouping has 5 line items, and notice at the end of those line items, it says excluded from limit total. These line items are bonds voted in that are not subject to compression through Measure 5 tax limitations. All right, any questions out there? I'm hoping for at least one. All right, next slide. Now we're going to get into appeals. Always a popular topic. The next 4 slides will deal with the appeal process. And it's important to note that in an appeal situation, a person is appealing their value. They are not appealing the amount of taxes owed. Remember, for most taxpayers, the real market value is higher than the assessed value. So if your appeal results in a real market value reduction, there still may not be any tax reduction if the real market value does not go below the assessed value or result in Measure 5 compression. Referring to the last bullet on the slide, if you have new construction or another Measure 50 exception event, and you think your value is too high, then you need to appeal, because the first year after an exception event is what sets your MAV. All right, the appeal process. This information is very important, so I'll go through each bullet on the next few slides.
Hey, Bronson,
Yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but before you get to the appeals, we do have a question from Bruce
right, great.
asking what is omitted property?
So the question is, what is omitted property? That's a great question, Bruce. So if I misspeak here, Lynn, since you're the subject matter expert, let me know. But omitted property is, and this isn't the law definition, we'll have to get that out and read it verbatim if you want the law definition, but essentially it's property that is on, so it's property that the Assessment Taxation Department, our department, does not find through the normal course of business. And we find it maybe the next year or the year after through, say, an overhead visual of the property. We'll see, oh, there's an extra building that was built there that wasn't built last year. So if it was built prior to when we find it, then it's omitted, and we can go back and assess that and put a value on it and also apply past taxes. Lynn, anything to add on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great explanation. I would just clarify, it's property that's not on the tax roll. And omitted property occurs for a number of reasons. Sometimes permits don't come to us. That's how we learn about new construction. If we don't receive the permit, we may not know about it. Also, sometimes additions or structures are built without permits, and then that creates permitted property. And the statutes require that when we discover omitted property, it requires us to add it to the tax roll.
Excellent. Thank you, Lynn. Let me know if there's any follow-up from Bruce on that. So back to the appeal process. Going down the bullets, bullet 1, you can call our office and talk to an appraiser, and we can check to ensure that our records are accurate and let you know if you may receive a tax decrease based on your requested value. Now, notice may receive, we won't know for certain, but we may be able to tell you. You'll have to call us to check. Bullet 2, appeals are processed through the County Board of Property Tax Appeals. This is referred to as BOPTA, and this is the official first step. Next bullet, BOPTA is administered by the county clerk's office, not by our office, not by the Assessment and Taxation Department. Bullet 4, typically the appeal paperwork must be filed by December 31st. However, because the clerk's office will be closed on Friday, December 31st this year for the New Year holiday, the appeal paperwork is due Monday, January 3rd, 2022. That's for this year. Bullet 5, BOPTA hears value appeals, not appeals of of the tax that you have to pay. Bullet 6, any value shown on your tax statement can be appealed. And then the last bullet, the board starts to consider appeals on the first Monday in February, and the process ends by April 15th. All right, we have some keys to the appeal process here. On bullets 1 and 2, remember the assessment date is always January 1st for every tax assessment year. This is the date we determine value. For your current property tax statement, the assessment date is January 1st, 2021. For the next 2 bullets, the petitioner has the burden of proof. This means the petitioner will need to have market evidence that shows support for the claim that the assessor's value is incorrect. Bullet 5 talks about preponderance of evidence, and what does that mean? Well, what that means is the petitioner must persuade the BOPTA board that it is more likely than not that the facts presented are true. And then the last 2 bullets display a couple of common mistakes. The first one, comparing your property tax to your neighbor's property tax. Remember, you are appealing value, not taxes. And then common mistake number 2 is comparing your values to the values of your neighbors. All right, now for the next slide, let's get into some information that will help you in the appeal process. All right, and this is also the last appeal slide, and bear with us here. We just have about 3 slides left. So what you're looking at is a list of supporting documentation that will help in an appeal. The first bullet is a recent sale of the property. So if you purchase your home in an arm's length transaction for, say, $350,000, and we have it valued at $450,000, that could be an indicator that we have your property value too high. For the next 2 bullets, a recent fee appraisal, and an appraisal will have a list of 4 or more comparable sales that support a value, which is what bullet 3 is describing, a comparison of sold properties similar to yours. And then bullet 4, if you have some sort of proof that we have an error on our records, and it does happen. For example, we have your home listed as 2,200 square feet and it's only 1,200 square feet. Bullet 5, construction costs can be an indicator of value for new construction. And then the last bullet, income and expense information for income producing properties like office buildings, retail centers, and multifamily housing. All right, that's it on appeals. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on these last 2 slides, but there is contact information if you would like to talk to a subject matter expert. We do have farm and forest land deferral programs, and Tony Hunter is our expert on this subject. His contact information is displayed here. At the bottom of the slide is a snapshot of our website, where you can also go to obtain more information, including eligibility requirements on these 2 deferral programs. All right, second to the last slide. Here you have contact information for Susan Brookshire. She is our expert on the senior and disabled deferral program and for veterans and active duty military exemption programs. So speaking of veterans, next week is Veterans Day, and I'm a veteran and served 4 honorable years in the United States Army. And I want to say thank you to all the veterans and current service members out there for your service. I appreciate what you have done and or what you're currently doing for our country. Are there any questions? If not, that is the end of the PowerPoint. Let me stop sharing here. Get back to.
Great. Thank you so much, Bronson. And with that, we'll take a a few more questions, so feel free to type there in the chat. I also want to repeat that if you found that you do want to talk to one of our appraisers after tonight's town hall regarding a specific property tax question, you can call our main office line at 503-655-8671 or send an email to propertytaxinfo@clackamas.us. Do we have any other questions?
I don't have any other general questions, but if anyone does have something, throw it in chat. We'd be happy to answer it.
Give it just a few more minutes. Okay, well, I don't think we have any more questions. So with that, I think we'll wrap up tonight's town hall. I want to thank all of our guests here tonight. Oh, we're getting something here. We actually do have a quick question. Question is, does basement square footage count if it's at not legal height?
Then you want to take that one?
Sure. You know, that's kind of a iffy question. I would say we would need to look at your specific property. You know, as far as what is legal height, depends on when it was built, that kind of thing. You could have finish in there. Is it heated? May not be legal for a bedroom, but might serve as a, you know, rec area, that kind of thing. So, you know, we'd have to inspect the property to determine what kind of value to put on that.
Okay. Another question came in. How is new construction value set?
Lynn, so I'm going to defer to Lynn. She's the appraisal manager.
Sure. So new construction value set. So if we're talking a new dwelling, a brand new house, so we use what's called the cost related market approach. We do mass appraisal. We have cost factors provided by the Department of Revenue. We come out and we inspect the home. We determine the size, verify the dimensions, that kind of thing, determine the quality of the home. That provides a value for the home, a cost approach value. And then depending upon the location and the neighborhood. So that sets the real market value. And then Bronson told you about the CPR, change property ratio, which is calculated every year. That change property ratio is applied to the real market value of the new construction, and that sets your assessed value. Hopefully that answered the question.
Great, thank you. And I think the last question, we'll give it right to Tammy here. Doing virtual town hall is very handy. Can you continue this process after COVID resolves?
Yeah, we agree, Susan. It works out well for those that can't get out. We do miss getting around in the community and seeing people in person, but I'm sure we will continue with the virtual town halls because it is very convenient for our citizens, our residents.
Great. I don't see any more questions. So with that, I'd like to wrap up tonight's town hall. Again, I want to thank all of our attendees and panelists for being here tonight. Again, attendees, if you have any questions or would like to speak to an appraiser, please call our main office line at 503-655-8671 or send an email to propertytaxinfo@clackamas.us. Again, my name is Scott Anderson from Clackamas County Public and Government Affairs. And thank you very much and have a great night.
I'd like to thank everyone. You had great questions and we really appreciate your attendance. It's important and we're happy to be here. Contact our office if you think of any other questions, and our staff will help you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks.